In our quick look at Psalm chapter 23, we've come to verse 5. It's a beautiful verse in this psalm, as are all of them. But in this verse, David says, "You prepare a table before me in the presence of my enemies. You have anointed my head with oil. My cup overflows." David knew what it was like to take the sheep from one grazing area to another to give them the most bountiful feast he could find for them. But here's a picture of my shepherd. I find this incredible that I am an honored guest at the banquet table of my shepherd. Why would he want to fellowship with me, a sheep in his flock? But he does, and he has prepared that for me. You prepare a table before me, the incredible provision of our shepherd for feeding, for food, for our welfare, the best of everything. But there's an interesting and somewhat jarring statement here in this verse, because David says, "You prepare a table before me in the presence of my enemies." He knew well that there were predators of the sheep, and that his job as a shepherd was to protect them so that they could graze peacefully. In this process, he is indicating, I think, that as sheep in our shepherd's sheepfold, we also are protected by him as we enjoy this wonderful feast with him. And so we have a great statement by David of the protection that our shepherd offers to keep enemies away. David had a lot of enemies. He writes about them on a regular basis. Paul had enemies, those who opposed him. Certainly Alexander the coppersmith was one of those. We all have enemies, and we have spiritual enemies as well. But I'm invited here to have a feast with my shepherd in which he protects me from those surrounding enemies, and I can in peace enjoy that feast, that fellowship in his presence. What a great idea. And then David says, "You've anointed my head with oil." Well, the sheep, if you think about sheep and the problems they face, they often wandered off into bushes and thickets and would be torn by thorns. And then also they also encounter insects, and David would need to anoint them with oil to protect them from the insects that they encountered. So it's a picture here of special anointing, a special privilege in a banquet sense for an honored guest, but certainly for the sheep on a regular basis, the shepherd had to do this. Well, the picture for you and for me is that we also are battered and bruised by life. Our shepherd comes along and he heals our wounds, and he brings protection to us from the circumstances that we often find ourselves in. Biblically speaking, oil has been used as a sign of joy and a sign of happiness. And so when David says, "You have anointed my head with oil," it's just a joyful picture as we recognize that God at this banquet time brings joy into our lives. Paul in Philippians chapter 4 talks about rejoicing in the Lord, doing that always. And we can only do that when the shepherd makes that possible in our lives and gives us the joy that we can have in him. What a great picture. Then there's a picture of the cup being filled here. David says, "My cup overflows." And he's thinking now of the water that he often would encounter, where he would need to maybe lower a rope 100 feet down into the ground and bring up cool water for the sheep to drink out of a stone jar or a stone bowl that would be around that well. And so he would make that provision with them. And he said, "My cup overflows." Well, I think a lot of times in our lives, we're just full of holes. And we have a shepherd who can patch those holes up and then fill us with overflowing goodness that comes from him. He provides the feast. He provides the refreshment in so many ways. I have to make sure I don't try to fill those holes with the things of this world that are transient and cannot satisfy. But my shepherd does a great job at filling those holes in my life. Well, we see, first of all, the banquet here. I'm an honored guest at the table of my shepherd. What a wonderful thing that is, as he provides provision for me and protection that I might enjoy that fellowship with him. And then there is the oil that is mentioned again. And again, I am a sheep and I am battered by life, but I am bathed in that process by the oil that my shepherd provides, an oil that brings to me honor as a guest and refreshment and joy in his family. And then finally, again, David said, "My cup runs over. I'm filled with the right things here. I'm filled with the goodness and the provision of my shepherd." I hope today that you're enjoying God's provision for you. The shepherd wants to fill you with all the good things that he can provide for you and for me as we walk in intimate fellowship with him. So look to him today to do that for you, to provide for you, to protect you, to protect you from evil, to fill your cup. And in that process, you enjoy your fellowship with him. With that, you have a very blessed day.